Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, this House was faced with a choice, and once again, the members opposite rejected the principle of property rights protection for land and homeowners across this province. As they voted down my private member's bill, NDP MLAs continually said that we needed to further await a review already 2 years in the making. To the Minister of Justice, when will the review of adverse possession be complete, and when will the results of that review be tabled in this House?
Honourable Justice Minister and Solicitor General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I believe what the honourable member is referring to is the request that the government made after the recommendations of an all-party committee that adverse possession be eliminated in Alberta. We had asked the Alberta Law Reform Institute to take a look at that. As I understand, they will be coming forward with recommendations later this fall to ensure that we enact that fully across all the acts throughout the government of Alberta.
First supplemental.
So we're hearing this fall. Mr. Speaker, given that the Standing Committee on Resource Stewardship, with an NDP chair and majority no less, voted to ask the Department of Justice to develop legislation to abolish adverse possession, and given that the minister has consistently failed to actually follow through on these recommendations, which should have been initiated as much as 2 years ago, again to the minister, when will we see this legislation in this House to abolish the doctrine of adverse possession?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, as I have said, an all-party committee studied the issue. They made recommendations that the doctrine of adverse possession be eliminated here in Alberta, Mr. Speaker, and that's why we asked the Alberta Law Reform Institute to take a look at all of our legislation throughout the government of Alberta to ensure, first off, Mr. Speaker, that we are impacting all things that have an impact on adverse possession so that we're getting it right, but also that we're not having any unintended consequences, because this has been in law for quite a long time in this province. Thank you.
Second supplemental.
Mr. Speaker, given that this government has an abysmal track record on standing up and protecting the property rights of Albertans, and given that various government MLAs demonstrated their lack of respect for landowners in Alberta when they dithered around the abolition of adverse possession, leading many Albertans to question this government's commitment to scrapping this punitive and archaic law. Again to the minister, when your review is complete, if the recommendation is to abolish this outdated law, will you commit today to following through on that recommendation and abolishing adverse possession at the earliest possible opportunity?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I believe I've said it twice before, but I'm happy to say it again a third time. An all-party committee has recommended the abolition of that doctrine. That's why we asked the Alberta Law Reform Institute to look at how best to abolish the doctrine, and that is what they're doing, Mr. Speaker. But in terms of our record on property rights, Mr. Speaker, it's pretty rich for the members opposite to stand up and say that after they voted against investments in the RCMP to protect the property of rural owners.
Honourable member for Lac-La-Biche.